Hello, friends and adventurers. Our podcast has been supported for months now by Misty Mountain Gaming, and they're now rewarding you, our listeners, with savings on all their fine D&D products such as metal dice, stone dice, glass dice, miniatures, adventures, dice trays, and more. You can use the code TWINS10, that's TWINS10, to save 10% on all purchases made in their online store at mistymountaingaming.com. Every code redeemed helps support Steven and I, and encourages us to make more and better content for you. So be sure to use code TWINS10 whenever you're buying premium Dungeons & Dragons dice and gear from our good friends at mistymountaingaming.com. Okay, on with the show. Having covered Faithful Steed, we move on to level 6. For the Paladin, nothing changes except for the addition of your next subclass feature. The Oath of Devotion Paladin will unlock the Smite of Protection, which sounds odd, frankly. I feel like we're having our cake and eating it too with that name a little bit there.
Dude, we've got monks that punch people to heal them. This is not that different.
Let's not open that can of worms. Really, though, as weird as the name is, I kinda dig this effect. It's entirely new for a paladin. When you use your Divine Smite, something that, let's face it, you were probably going to be doing anyway.
If you weren't, you're doing it wrong.
You can choose yourself, great option, always, or somebody nearby, an ally within 30 feet of you, to gain temporary hit points to the tune of a d8, plus the level of the spell slot you use to smite. So somewhere between 1d8 plus 1, 1d8 plus 5, or something different if you multiclass. The ability to deal damage and protect yourself or someone else is a level of utility of the paladin and a level of utility for a smite that we just haven't seen before.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. This is the coolest subclass feature for the Oath of Devotion. None of them are weak. All of them are good, but this is the one that excites me the most. It's going to be one of the ones that you're going to get the earliest, and it's going to be the one that you use the most, by far. If you're not smiting as a paladin, then you are paladining wrong. And this really emphasizes the fact that the paladin is just more than someone who deals damage. Now, every time you choose who to hurt, you are also choosing someone to protect. And if you decide that you want to be that frontline paladin, you can give yourself a lot of staying power with this ability. And if not, you can use this feature from the back line, sniping people with your divine longbow, and you can throw that temporary hit points to the frontliner, giving them that little bit of extra protection that they need to keep the enemies far, far away from you.
I agree that this is probably the neatest thing that the Oath of Devotion Paladin has on offer. Maybe that's just because I'm excited to see smiting being something other than smiting. But I think it's going to really shine when you use it on someone other than yourself. Because when we get away from 6th level, the very next level at 7th, we are going to unlock our Aura of Protection, which is going to reward us and those immediately around us for staying together in a combat, for grouping up. And your ability to pass temporary hit points to a less prepared and less capable party member to help them stay close to you is going to benefit everyone in that fight.
Since you mentioned that Aura of Protection, let's go ahead and have a look at it. It is coming in one level later than it used to. Previously, Aura of Protection was a 6th level Paladin feature, and now it is a 7th level one. But it functions in a very similar way to the way that it was implemented in 5th edition. It will be extremely familiar to anyone who's used it there before. It states that your paladin is going to radiate an invisible protective aura that extends from them 10 feet in every direction. Both the paladin and all allies that stand within that aura are going to gain a bonus to every saving throw equal to the Paladin's charisma modifier. This, if for no other reason, is why Paladins can't dump their charisma stat. I know it's fun to bump that strength score and to get a whole bunch of extra damage in, but the ability to add a potential +5 to every saving throw made by every party member within a 10-foot radius of the Paladin, and one that is always on for them, is weirdly probably the best defensive ability in the game. The combat effectiveness of this rivals Divine Smite.
In fact, this is kind of what I think of when I think of the Paladin. This, I wish, was more of the Paladin's core feature. And it is getting some extra emphasis here in One D&D. First off, I'd like to go ahead and note that the fact that it is stated to be an invisible aura is a new distinction, which is just interesting to me that they felt the need to go ahead and explain that. Were people doing it differently, and was it a problem? Just something odd.
As a Paladin, your halo just got really, really big.
Your head just got really, really big.
Well, the halo had to match.
They've also cleaned it up a little bit, too, making sure that if you have a multi-Paladin party, that there was no ambiguity as to how overlapping auras worked, down in the last paragraph of the feature here. But the main thing that I notice about this, the biggest change in my mind, is that they took away the caveat saying that this aura is only maintained while the Paladin is conscious. So now I guess you can lie on the floor and continue to protect your friends while dying.
You still inspire confidence, even from the ground. You inspire them to protect themselves and to continue to protect your soon-to-be corpse.
Fascinating.
You know, the distinction that I thought was the most interesting is how they mentioned that now it doesn't extend through total cover, which I don't believe was a caveat in 5th edition. But I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, like, how can you inspire confidence? How can you protect your allies if the two of you can't see one another?
I mean, I would argue that you can't see the other one if you're unconscious, but neither here nor there.
Well, at least they can still see you.
That is an odd thing. I can climb inside of a steamer trunk and no longer benefit from the Paladin's aura protection. Anyway, no complaints really. Small changes aside, I think this is a great ability for any class. And frankly, when I have created different homebrew classes, short-range auras to encourage the party to stick together and consider positioning on the battlefield have been themes that have shown up. And that is inspired by how great I think the Paladin's aura protection is. But enough about level 7, let's get on to level 8. You get a feat.
Everyone on board with that? Feats at level 8? I just want to make sure we don't miss anything, because of how unique that feature is. Okay, seems like everyone's on the same page. Let's talk about the 9th level feature that all Paladins get, the Abjure Foes Channel Divinity option. This is going to sound very familiar. It's not that dissimilar from some of the Channel Divinity options offered by several subclasses. It's not really that different from the Oath of Devotion's Turn the Unholy, although it is probably a lot more similar to the Oath of Vengeance's Abjure Enemies. The way that it works is that you'll present your holy symbol, and then you'll select a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier within 60 feet of yourself and force them to make a wisdom saving throw against both the dazed and frightened conditions. If they fail to save, they will retain those conditions for a full minute without another opportunity to make a saving throw. However, if they take any damage during that time, both conditions will be ended. If, however, they do manage to make a saving throw, they don't get the frightened condition, but they still get the dazed condition for 1 minute or until they take any damage. So the dazed condition is a certainty. The frightened condition is a possibility.
So let's talk about the dazed condition so we can really evaluate how effective that is. And we've talked about it before, but let's go over it again because it is important. This condition would force any player afflicted with it, or any creature afflicted with it, to choose between taking a move or an action on their turn, and only of those two options. Reactions and bonus actions are not options for a dazed character. So, you spend an action, a magic action, and one use of your Channel Divinity, which, by the way, you got 4 here at level 9, and that's as many as you will ever get, to force up to 5 creatures to only move or attack on their turns. This is a huge boon for the Paladin, whether or not those targets get frightened.
I almost never use this term in my day-to-day life, but guys, this is a banger. This is better than most spells that like bards and wizards can cast at this level, okay? This is approaching hypnotic pattern levels of good. Arguably the best crowd control spell in the game.
This doesn't have just the opportunity to take a creature out of the combat like dealing damage would. This has the ability, like some high-level spells like Slow. Here at 9th level, the Paladin is unlocking the ability to change the face of an entire combat, taking creatures with multiple parts of a turn and reducing them down to one as the worst case scenario, I remind you, is just incredible. Like, this is what I am looking forward to unlocking when I play a Paladin.
Oh, and also, did we mention the fact that, you get to apply this condition to everyone using a use of your Channel Divinity feature, which is not even using up your spell slots? Oh, and by the way, did we also mention that here at 9th level, your Channel Divinity uses max out at a total of 4?
We did mention both of those things.
Yeah, I feel like they just need re-emphasizing after we told you how good it is, because that, I don't know, that's pretty huge. This feature is incredible, and it comes along with increasing your proficiency bonus up to 4 as usual and gaining access to 3rd level spells like a good half-caster should.
It's interesting. I don't know that I really noticed this in 5th edition as much. It was pretty clear in 5e that 3rd level was a big bump, that level 5 was a significant increase in power, but here as we're looking through 1D&D, I'm noticing 9th level a lot more. The access to higher level spells, the increased proficiency bonus, especially here when you're unlocking more Channel Divinity options and Channel Nature options. And the level 9 option for most of the classes we've looked at so far has been reasonably iconic.
Well, it has been one of their design goals to kind of share the love, right? To kind of spread things out. Not only they're trying to solve the problem of all the front-loaded classes in 5th edition and trying to give you reasons to stick with a class longer, both of which they've plainly stated, they're also trying to make sure that you get something cool just about every level. Unless you're a druid. But I'm still kind of salty about them. Some of those weren't anything to write home about, in my opinion.
Let's go down to level 10, where we are going to unlock our next subclass option. And we see the return here of the Aura of Devotion. This was available to 5th edition clerics as early as 7th level, but with how things are being rearranged, here it comes at level 10. And it's functioning pretty much the same way. Allies who are within your aura cannot be charmed. There's a little bit of a distinction here that, once again, no longer have to be conscious to be able to extend that aura, and that if any charmed ally enters the area, you are able to temporarily suppress that charmed effect. Now, rather than stating that this is a new aura ability, we are seeing that this is modifying your aura of protection. We're continuing 1D&D's theme of kind of cleaning up the class abilities and consolidating things as much as possible. So now, rather than gaining a whole new class feature, your existing class feature gains a new effect.
In 5th edition, there was a trend that each subclass would unlock an additional aura to add onto the aura of protection. And that still seems to be the case here in 1D&D. I expect that to be a trend that carries on throughout all the other subclasses as well. Now, it used to be in 5th edition that you unlocked it immediately after unlocking your Aura of Protection, gaining it at 7th level. Now we have to wait a little bit longer for it, but they are making it worth the wait. In previous editions, that would make you immune to that charmed effect, but it noticeably didn't have that sentence where it said that it suppresses existing charmed effects. So this means that if one of your allies becomes charmed by an enemy, your positioning can solve that. And personally, I think that's fun. It gives the Paladin a little bit more of a reason to move, and especially if you're mounted on a certain faithful steed, you'll be able to relocate to them quickly in order to grant them that benefit. And finally, before we move on from 10th level, I think that it should bear mentioning that this is where the Paladin gains access to their third cantrip. They only get 3 all the way up to 20th level, and they don't unlock the third one here until 10th. Thankfully, you are a prepared caster, so you can rotate them out a little bit. But now, instead of having a constant 2 options available to you at any time, you can up that by 50% to a constant 3.
Let's push on to 11th level. Here we have Radiant Strikes. This is replacing the previous Paladin feature, Improved Divine Smite, which I think was actually kind of a misnomer, because it actually had nothing to do with your Divine Smite.
Nothing at all. It was actually kind of frustrating. I would have preferred an improved Divine Smite.
You unlock that at 11th level in 5e, and you unlock that at 11th level here in 1D&D. One of the few occasions where something comes in at the same time. Interesting. Nevertheless, this is literally nothing new, because it is basically the same as the old improved Divine Smite, and indeed, it is basically the same as the Divine Strikes from the 5th edition Clerics subclasses, with a slight omission. When you hit a target with an attack roll using a simpler martial weapon, again, sorry, unarmed strike paladins out there, you get to deal extra damage, 1d8 radiant damage. Notably, this happens as often as you hit a target with a weapon attack. So you can fully leverage the extra attack you unlocked 6 levels ago, and any offhand attacks that you wish to make.
I'm glad that they didn't give this the same treatment that they did with Divine Smite, saying they could only be done once per turn, because this will give you the opportunity to get in a little bit of extra damage, even if you cast the spell on the same turn. And you can do it when you attack on your turn, or when you attack on someone else's turn as part of a reaction, both of which as many times as is applicable. And yeah, this is what I was saying before. Why in your interview that you put up on YouTube do you brag about the Paladins getting some support for unarmed strikes if it's only in a single feature? Like, are we enabling that playstyle or not? We need to make up our minds here.
Well, you'll see that they bring it back when we eventually get to talk about the revised Smite spells for the Divine Spell list. But yeah, for the Paladin itself, if it's not going to work with everything, I'm still not going to do it.
With all of that said about 11th level, we can safely move on to the 12th level feature, which unlocks a feat.
Cool. Moving on.
13th level, we're going to unlock 4th level spells, a +5 proficiency bonus, and we get the Aura of Courage. Once again, we're doubling down on the Paladin's aura, making this possibly the most central feature of a Paladin. Which, I guess you could make the argument that it was before in 5th edition as well, but I think it's a shoo-in here in 1D&D. Once again, modifying your existing aura, the Aura of Courage feature makes your Aura of Protection extend an immunity to being frightened to both you yourself and any friends who are standing within it.
This is basically the frightened equivalent of the Aura of Devotion offered by the subclass. And this is what you want from your Paladin. You don't want your holy warrior in all their armor and brimming with divine power, turning tail and running, ever. And you want them to inspire that behavior in others. You want your party to stand in the face of overwhelming odds and adversity. And here at 13th level, you can assure that no one is going to have to turn tail and run. They still might, but they won't have to.
This functions extremely similarly to the Aura of Devotion that we got as part of our Oath of Devotion subclass back at 10th level. It now suppresses the frightened condition on anyone who enters the aura, and it similarly no longer cares whether or not you are conscious, like it used to in 5th edition.
So weird!
Now, in 5th edition, you used to unlock the Aura of Courage at 10th level, so we are, once again, moving it further back down the line here to 13th level, but I still contend that it's worth the wait. And in case I haven't said it before, which I think I have, I love that we're just adding on more features to the existing aura.
It is so much cleaner, and when, in just a few levels, we make one change to our Aura of Protection, it will by default and by consequence affect all of these subsequent effects that we are tacking onto it, which is just, chef's kiss, beautiful. And I want to get to talking about that as soon as possible, so let's press forward. But before we leave 13th level, we're enjoying now our +5 proficiency bonus and 4th level spell slots. Now we're finally on that flying Pegasus, my friend. And pushing on to 14th level, we will keep those bonuses, those new spells, and add to them our 14th level subclass feature for the Oath of Devotion, Holy Nimbus!
Holy Nimbus, Batman! But seriously, that's the reaction that you should be having when you start reading about the Holy Nimbus. Because those of you who have read up on Paladins from 5th edition will recognize that that is the name of the 5th edition Paladins capstone feature that they did not access until level 20. And yet here in 1D&D, we're unlocking a feature with that name at 14th level. And as we begin to dig into it, it's actually better than the Paladin's old capstone. This is mind-boggling. I don't think we've seen something like this in our entirety of the playtest content that we've been given so far. Never have we seen an ability this big get moved this much. And get improvements while it's at it.
Let's dive in. As a bonus action, you modify your aura of protection. Isn't that wonderful? Now, for the next minute, or until you end it as a subsequent bonus action, your aura gains a new effect. And this time, it's not affecting your allies, but your foes.
Any enemy that finds itself within your aura of protection is not going to be protected. In fact, they're going to be taking some damage, and that damage is going to be equal to your charisma modifier plus your proficiency bonus every time they start their turn within your new illuminated aura, because your aura is now going to be filled with sunlight.
So at the level that you unlock this, that's going to be a minimum of 5 plus whatever you have brought your charisma modifier up to, which, as we've already said, thanks to how your aura of protection has worked up to this point, you're going to want that number pretty high. So best case scenario, 10 damage a turn to anything that fits in that aura. This is kind of the first time I've felt like a ranged paladin lost some support, because this aura is going to be on for the next minute. We're going to want to be shoving as many of our enemies into that aura as we possibly can. And the fact that it's sunlight is going to have some pretty telling applications. Specifications of what kind of light is affecting creatures around you rarely comes up, but when it does, you want it to be sunlight.
Let's talk about a couple of more ways that this new Holy Nimbus feature is differentiated from its 5e counterpart. Already we're seeing improvements because it activates on a bonus action. It used to activate on an action, and I love the fact that we are moving all of the features away from that. It's going to start out with a shorter range. The Holy Nimbus feature that came in at 20th level in 5th edition extended from you a full 30 feet, because incidentally that was how far a 20th level Paladin's aura extended at that time. We will get there in 1D&D as well, but we're not there yet. Let's remember that we're getting this a full 6 levels earlier, so a couple of temporary drawbacks are to be expected. Right now, we're dealing pretty similar damage to what we were dealing in 5th edition because it was set to a flat 10. In 1D&D, there is the potential for it to start lower, but there's also the potential for it to end higher.
Right. Since the way that epic boons are going to be working and high-level ASIs are too, you're going to see numbers higher than 20 coming up without magical assistance on every character sheet. So yes, while it starts lower, we have it increased maximum potential.
Right, when our proficiency bonus increases to +6 and at 20th level, we can get our charisma modifier up to +6. That means that we're now dealing a potential 20% higher damage when we get to that point. The only thing that we really lose for all of these benefits was that the Holy Nimbus feature in 5th edition gave you advantage on saving throws that were cast by fiends or undead. While losing the advantage on saving throws does feel extremely painful, and fiends and undead are fairly pervasive enemy types, it only applies to spells that were cast by them. So any non-spell magical effects that they're putting out would be completely unaffected by this anyway. Although it's really good, it's excessively niche, and I will gladly take that hit in order to get all of the other benefits that the 14th level 1D&D Holy Nimbus is offering us. And we haven't even talked about the coolest part of all of this.
I'm not sure if coolest is the right word, but I like that it's here. Both in 1D&D and 5th edition, you only had the opportunity to use this once per long rest. However, you have access to 4th level spell slots here at 14th level. If you're willing to give up that spell slot, the highest level spell slot that you have access to, then you can earn the option to use Holy Nimbus again. And as you get access to extra 4th level spell slots and even 5th level spells, this will make a pretty strong argument for how you want to spend those high-level spells.
The ability to use your high-level spells to gain another use of your 20th level transformation type ability that you got in 5th edition was something that was added in later on in the supplemental books where new Paladin subclasses were introduced. However, it was never retroactively applied to some of the originals like Oath of Devotion, so it's nice to see that the players who really like the OG Paladin subclasses are getting that support.
It's also neat, and this is obvious to some people. I love that you don't have to spend any extra parts of your action economy to take advantage of this. You use the same bonus action to switch it on and just mark off a spell slot.
All in all, this is a very fun feature. And even though it comes in way at 14th level, it does give me some hope that they're not just taking this opportunity to kind of clean up the Paladin or to take away some of the power from some of their core features. The Wizards of the Coast team hasn't given up on Paladins, and they're really showing them some love with this feature. I hope that it stays, if not exactly like this, then at least something that is extremely similar and clearly recognizable as such.
Moving up to 15th level, you unlock an additional spell slot of 4th level. So you have an opportunity to use that Holy Nimbus again, or to use your Holy Nimbus and summon a Flying Steed. Good for you. You're also getting Restoring Touch. Hey, remember that Lay on Hands feature you got all the way back at 1st level and it hasn't changed since then?
It's been 84 years.
Now we have a new function for it. Rather than just being able to spend 5 points from your Lay on Hands pool and end the poisoned condition on a creature, now you are able to use it to cure basically anything. Blinded, charmed, dazed, deafened, frightened, paralyzed, or stunned. If any creature you touch is ailing from any of those, you can end them with 5 points from your Lay on Hands pool. With the caveat, it's 1 effect per 5. If they're affected by 5 of those things, you gotta spend 25 to clear them.
But you can remove as many as you want with a single casting if you have the points to do so. Now, this Restoring Touch feature is extremely similar to the Cleansing Touch feature that 5e Paladins would have gotten at 14th level, so it comes in 1 level later. The Cleansing Touch feature, however, didn't affect conditions. It affected spells. And it wasn't tied to your Lay on Hands feature, it was something that you tracked completely separately. Back then you would just touch a creature, mark off a use of Cleansing Touch, and a spell that was affecting that creature, or, even yourself if you wanted it to, would simply end. That could be extremely powerful, but being affected by conditions comes up a lot more often than being affected by spells.
And let's face it, the worst spells apply conditions to you. So Restoring Touch is doing most of what I was looking to Cleansing Touch to do. Because the worst spells, we both agreed, are the ones that take away your free will, like Dominate Monster or Hold Person. And ending the stunned condition and ending the charmed condition take those out of the equation. It's also nice, as you said before, that we're not tracking one more thing for the Paladins. We're just continuing to keep track of something that we have been keeping track of for the past 14 levels.
Now, I do like that this is a little bit more cleanup on the Paladin, that it's giving you less things to track. However, I'm not as thrilled that it's cutting into my Lay on Hands pool, because whenever I played a Paladin, that sucker got used up pretty much every time I went to go take a long rest. I'm getting the maximum use out of Lay on Hands every go-round. So when we look at things like the Paladin's Channel Divinity, they gave you more ways to use it, but they also gave you more of it. So it isn't really cutting into the ability's other uses that you had from before. I'm not as thrilled that the Restoring Touch, even though it is better, it's not coming in without a cost. So this one's okay for me. I'm not upset about the way that it's structured, but I'm not as excited about it as I am for many of the other changes that they've made to the existing features.
Here's my argument there. First of all, I think that you were burning through all of your Lay on Hands because it was there, and you're still going to find yourself coming down to the end of it because it was there. 2, this is allowing you to utilize the same action that you are healing a creature as well as clearing these conditions from them. Rather than having to use an action to lay on hands and use an action to cleansing touch, you're going to be able to do both in one. And finally, if it is the option between healing or casting a spell or making an attack and using my cleansing touch, I haven't seen cleansing touch really get utilized like maybe designers of the game thought it might or hoped it would. Putting it back on laying hands, a more versatile class ability, will mean that restoring touch will probably see more play. At least, that's my hope.
That is true, and it is nice that you can do them both at once. I do admit that that does sound appealing. I mean, I think I feel more positively about it than not. I just would like, hey, also you get more lay on hands. That'd be pretty neat,
I'll admit, I'm just excited to see emphasis placed on Paladin's core abilities like the aura and lay on hands in a non-smite-wordly direction.
Well, a lot of the features that we're talking about are just reworks of their existing features, so they're not adding on a whole lot of new stuff. Ironically, the one thing that they did add on that was new when looking at the class and subclasses as opposed to their 5th edition counterparts had to do with Smite. It was that protecting Smite. So, it's like, I feel like you say that, but the exact opposite is true. They're just taking those abilities and cleaning them up, moving them to bonus actions, improving them slightly, and consolidating them heavily.
I hear you, but then why am I so happy?
That's what it's like when you agree with me and just you don't understand because you do it so rarely. After 15th level comes 16th level. Shocker. 16th level gives us a feat. It's the same as every other 16th level. We can continue on from there.
17th level. Here we go, mama. Now we're finally talking aura expansion. You remember that aura that has been getting buffed all this time?
Yeah.
It switched on at 7th level.
Yeah.
It got cooler at 10th level. It got even cooler at 13th level.
Yeah.
It turned into a holy nimbus at 14th level, and now it's tripling in size.
Let's go! Everything that you love about your aura of protection and all of the different auras that have been added onto it can now apply to people who are up to 30 feet away. Now everyone doesn't have to huddle around the Paladin. You can spread out a little bit without feeling like you're losing something by taking a couple of steps away from the Paladin. Which, let's be honest, at this point in the game, you would be losing a lot by taking a couple of steps away from the Paladin. And in addition to all of the benefits which you're conferring upon your allies who stand in the aura, this is also extending the range of your Holy Nimbus, meaning that you're now going to be dealing that charisma modifier plus proficiency bonus damage to everyone within a 30-foot radius of you. It means you're going to be shining sunlight within a 30-foot radius of you.
And it's worth noting that proficiency bonus at 17th level just went to level 6.
Matter of fact, there's actually a lot of stuff that's happening here at 17th level. You're unlocking 5th level spells as well. We haven't mentioned it since we first unlocked them way back at level 3, but, it probably bears mentioning that you've been getting oath spells this entire time, and we just haven't been talking about it. But by the 17th level, you will have unlocked all of them. So maybe it's worth taking a second to go back and take a look at the ones that we've picked up along the way.
Well, before we get distracted from it, aura expansion. Huge.
Literally huge, like 60-foot diameter.
The number of creatures you can fit into a Holy Nimbus, just because the range is going from 10 feet to 30 feet, the number of spaces in that area is more than tripled. You are going to be able to fit so many enemies. This bad boy can fit so many enemies in it. I slapped the hood of my car. You're going to be able to fit your entire party on most battle maps into an aura that increases their saving throws and prevents them from being charmed or frightened. This is the coolest thing to me. And it's coming in a level earlier than you were getting it in 5th edition. But yes, Oath of Devotion spells, way back at 5th level, go back in your mind. You unlocked Zone of Truth, one of the most contentious spells in the game, and also Aid.
Which, if we recall, has been reworked to be a lot less exciting. Maybe they'll revise that in the near future. I hope they do. At 9th level, you're going to unlock Aura of Vitality and Blinding Smite, adding those to your list of always prepared spells. Blinding Smite has been reworked, and we're going to be talking about that in our next episode.
Then you have the Staggering Smite spell, and the esoteric Guardian of Faith, which I think is Egyptian.
I'm sure that's exactly how you pronounce it.
Some might say Guardian of Faith. However, they're incorrect. Really cool spell, though. I like that one.
Those come in at 13th level, and then here at 17th, you get your final two, Commune and Flame Strike.
Guess which one we're more excited about.
I mean, it's Flame Strike. It's pretty good.
It's Flame Strike.
I had a combat a couple of weeks ago where I realized that I had put in two enemy characters that both had access to Flame Strike. That was a pretty fun combat because I hit the party with two Flame Strikes in the same turn. It was delicious.
Yeah, well, anything that well seared is probably delicious.
No, that's a lie. Well done. Well done is not that tasty.
Nearing the end, we are at 18th level, where a paladin gains access to the feature Divine Conduit. Whenever a paladin rolls initiative, they gain a use of the class's channel divinity. This is new for the Paladin, but it's nothing new to 1D&D.
Yeah.
We've seen very similar features appear in other classes. It just wants to assure you that whenever you go into combat, you've at least got one opportunity to do your cool thing.
Yeah, this is consistent with the changes that 1D&D has made to the Druid and the Bard, rolling initiative with additional uses of a limited resource. It's new, it's good. So my issue isn't that it isn't beneficial or even that it's not better than stuff you got in 5e. It's just that it's comparatively boring compared to all the stuff that we've had before. I mean, granted, most of the features that we've gotten as a paladin up to this point have kind of been passive, right? Whether it's the radiant strikes or the auras, a lot of those are just kind of things that happen, not necessarily things that you do. But even those are more exciting than just refilling in a dot on your character sheet every time you roll initiative.
It's true. And, you know, the video game mindset for me, right? Like, I love passive abilities. Rather than having to remember to press the button, I would rather just be more statically good at something. That said, when you're playing D&D, you want to be active. You want to be doing something. We literally have a bit of vernacular between the Godfather and us of unlocking new abilities that give you a new button to press, specifically because we were playing on virtual tabletops where you literally pressed a button whenever you wanted to do something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the Paladin doesn't have a lot of buttons to press unless they're coming from its newly acquired spells.
They got one button to press, and it's the smite button, and we know how you feel about pressing the smite button at this point.
And you don't even get to press that one as often.
You know, this is giving you an additional use of your channel divinity, which...
I mean, that is a whole new Abjure Foes.
Yeah, and thank goodness for Abjure Foes, because your third-level sacred weapon just absolutely pales in comparison. And I mean, who really cares if they walk into a combat with a use of Divine Sense, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that you can never be without Abjure Foes is something. It's not particularly exciting, but it is valuable.
After 18th level, things get pretty standard. 19th level, you unlock a feat. 20th level, you unlock an epic boon, which... in this playtest material comes with an ability score increase that can push you beyond the limit of 20, and the epic boon feats that we'll discuss later have a similar ability wrapped in. So here, we're finally dialing that Holy Nimbus up to 11, as high as we can possibly make it go. +6, +7 kind of territory. And that's it. That's the Paladin. Yes, they have taken a hit. They are not nearly the single target damage nukes that they are in 5th edition. And I know no matter what we say, that's going to make some people hate this version of the Paladin. But to me, when I think of Paladin, this is pretty much what I think of. Otherworldly steed notwithstanding. Buffing the party, preventing negative effects, adding damage to themselves, adding hit points, temporary though they may be, to people around them. And now you have the option of doing it from farther away and with a more diverse array of delivery methods for your radiant damage.
A paladin to me is the centerpiece of the party. They're the focal point, right? And that is nowhere more evident than on the battlefield, where the entire party surrounds them thanks to all the auras that they confer. Literally standing in the center of the party. And I think that that is still the case here in 1D&D. While they have shuffled around a lot of these elements, I do feel like it is still quintessentially the iconic paladin that we've come to know and love. And while they have definitely dialed back the paladin in a lot of ways, they've also tuned them up a little bit more subtly in several other areas. So, Rob, what are your final impressions of the Paladin? How are you feeling about how they're presented here?
I guess at the end of the day, I am more intrigued by this Paladin than the one in 5th edition. At early levels, you have access to cantrips and are encouraged to use your spells for more than just smiting. Once your auras come online in those mid-levels, the nature of your class really starts to change. And at high levels, you are just a crowd-controlling powerhouse. And genuinely, the opportunity to play a paladin with a longbow is just so interesting to me that I might have to play one just on principle alone. I imagine this particular scene in Whitestone in the first Legends of Vox Machina season, or maybe was it in Whitestone or was it the battle against Brimscythe?
I don't know. You got to finish the sentence first and let me know.
Either way, Pike imbues one of Vex's arrows with radiant energy before she looses it in the direction of her target. And just that image was so appealing to me, and I genuinely thought the first time I saw that, why can't paladins smite with bows? And here, I'm given that option. You continually reference how the design team at Wizard of the Coast wants to be presenting us with the bardiest bard, the rangeriest ranger, the roguiest rogue, and this feels like an awfully paladin-y paladin to me, and I'm okay with that. If this was the final version of the paladin that we got for the next edition of Dungeons & Dragons, everyone else's opinion be damned, I'd be happy. I do kind of wish that the unarmed strike potential went on, though.
Yeah, have you played a 5th edition paladin before?
I have.
Huh, I must have missed that one.
That was in a Katie Garrison game. I played a albino red dragonborn named Vermilion who dual-wielded longswords.
Ugh. Yep, okay. Some trademark Rob irony.
Yep.
You name your characters that die martyr, and you name your albino dragonborn Vermilion.
He was a red dragon. He had a flame breath attack. He had resistance to fire. He just looked white.
Ugh. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. I do have a couple of notes on some things that I would have done differently, and I will definitely be letting Wizards of the Coast know about them when I go to take the survey. However, I do feel extremely positively about the Paladin as presented here overall.
Honestly, that's not what I expected from you.
I think they came for the Paladin in the right areas, in the right ways. I am not afraid to admit, I usually take options when playing board games and video games. I usually don't pick like the most powerful one because I want to find something that is a little bit less optimal and then find a way to make it work. But because of that, I'm also not ashamed to admit when I do the exact opposite. And I like Paladins because of their vibe and because of their aesthetic, but I'm not ashamed to admit that they are really, really good at probably too many things, and I like the way that they addressed those here. The Paladin's primary strength got hit, and it got hit fairly hard, like noticeably, but they gave them so many just incremental improvements at every other step of their progression that as someone who enjoys playing Paladins, I just can't be mad after all of that. And I think that they've made a really strong case, just like they had in 5th edition, for making Paladin a class that you take all the way to level 20.
But that's just our thoughts on the Paladin. Odds are yours are probably radically different, and we would like to know them. You can tag us on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, or join our community Discord and tell us directly how we're wrong, or if you agree with us, maybe.
If you get the chance to play test the One D&D Paladin before me, please let me know how that experience went. I probably won't get a chance to do so for a couple of weeks yet, at least, and that wait is hard for me. So maybe allow me to live vicariously through you, dear listener. And as always, when you get a chance to work through this playtest content, be sure to let Wizards of the Coast know how you feel about it, whether we're talking about the Druid or the Paladin, or some of the rule and spell changes that we'll be going over in our next episode. It's important to give the designers some feedback because it is plainly evident that they are listening to it. And the more responses, the more feedback, the more ideas that we can give them, the more pleased we'll be with the final result when it gets released next year.
Right. You can't complain about not getting something that you didn't ask for, so let Wizards of the Coast know how you feel. And Even though we didn't say it at the top of the episode, I hope you know by now that in the description of this episode is a link to everything that we've been covering today so that you can see this information in detail for yourself. We don't have that much more to cover in this particular playtest packet, so we'll be tackling everything that we haven't touched on already in our next episode.
And we're looking forward to providing you with that in our next episode of Bardic Twinspiration. Catch you then.
If you enjoyed this episode and wish to hear more like it, please consider supporting us on Patreon or on Anchor.fm. You can also support us by using code TWINS10, that's TWINS10, whenever buying dice or other premium Dungeons & Dragons products from MistyMountainGaming.com. Or just by sharing us with your friends. If you'd like to join the conversation, please join our community Discord, or reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Links to all of that below the episode. And hey, in case you don't hear it anywhere else this week, we love you guys. Till next time.
The combat effectiveness of this rivals Divine Smite. This Aura of Courage gets the same treatment as the Oath of Devotion's Aura of... Did I say that right? This sounds so similar.
Oath of Devotion's Aura of Devotion.
Yeah, that's why it sounded wrong, I think.
Or did we talk about proficiency bonus and spell slots there?
We also haven't come back and mentioned our oath spells at any point after we unlocked them, but that ship has probably sailed.
We're humans. We'll address it and say we forgot.
Maybe they'll re-revise that in the near future. I hope they do.
Re-revise.
Yeah.
Re-revise.
That was, yeah,
I don't know, I just like the way it rolled off the tongue. So here, we're finally dialing that Holy Nimbus up to 11, as high as we can possibly make it go.
12.
And,
12. I'm sorry. Yeah, you meant dialing up to 11 as like the expression. I'm thinking actually it literally goes to 12. I was thinking that you miscalculating the numerical value that you could achieve.